in the hot seat. I'm your host, Leaso Filoeli, coming to you live from Texas. And joining me from Oklahoma is our one and only Chief Tasi Ayafe. Tonight's guest
Alabama.
is a wo- Tonight's guest is a woman whose work is changing lives across the Pacific Islander diaspora, not with spotlight or fanfare, but with data, dignity, and deep cultural responsibility. Born in Tonga and raised in Monterey, California, with over 15 years of experience in nonprofit leadership, community organizing, and public health advocacy, she has become one of the most respected voices in the national movement to make sure Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders are seen, counted, and prioritized. Her work has been featured by UCLA Health, NHPI Alliance, and AAPI Data. She's led critical campaigns for pandemic outreach, youth empowerment, and disaggregated data reporting that have shifted the way health equity is understood in this country. But tonight, we're not just talking titles. We're diving into her story, her faith, her fire, and the fight she carries every day for people who are often left out of the conversation. Please help us welcome to the hot seat a true daughter of the islands, a protector of our stories, and a champion for those still waiting to be heard. Alisi Tulua, welcome.
Welcome,
What's
Alisi.
up?
Maloy.
Thank you. That is a beautiful introduction. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you being on the hot seat, and we're so grateful to have you on. Before we begin, we like to know who Alisi is when no one is looking.
That's interesting. First of all, I wanna just say thank you both to you, Leaso and Tasi, for inviting me and having me here to spend time with all of you. And I appreciate and am humbled with by the invitation. I also just want to pay acknowledgments to, this land that we are on, and no matter wherever you are in the world, we know as Pacific Islanders, as Pacifica, and as a Tongan woman, that acknowledging the place and the people that the place belongs to is part of our culture and our cultural practice of respect. And I also just want to pay my respects to everyone that has poured into me and my journey, and that is not limited to my family, but also the community that has helped to raise me. And thank you for this beautiful question. Who am I when nobody's looking? I am a workaholic. I hide away in the evenings and catch up on work, and try to learn. I guess that's the other thing about me is I love to learn. I am a lifetime learner, and am constantly trying to live through people's experiences and live through their lives vicariously, because I know I can never experience all of life in my lifetime, which also allows me to learn a lot. I I am an immigrant. I am a Tongan immigrant and a proud daughter of Tonga, and an only daughter, and have many brothers, and somebody that carries the responsibility of a sister coming from a Tongan household, of having to carry the burden of both praise and also responsibility. And so I live with that, especially now as an adult. And I am also proudly living at home with my parents. I count myself lucky that as an adult, I get to just be home with them as they age. For a long time, grappled with the choice to not have children. And also when no one's looking, I'm also a divorced woman, and I've had to live through a struggle of figuring out what that means for my life. But I remember as a little girl growing up, always thinking that, oh no, one day I'm going to be married and have my own kids, and will never be around my parents to pay them back for everything that they've invested in me. And I guess that little girl's whisper came true, because then, I get to be an auntie to all of my brother's children, and I get to live at home as an adult and be able to give back to my parents as much as I can. just to quell the worry of that little girl that was always worried that I would be so far away from my parents and never get back. So that those are all the dimensions that I live in and that are in my head when nobody else is paying attention or looking. But I live in that I live in that world very happily. You know, in the midst of everything else that's happening.
What a great opportunity. I mean, a lot of islanders they wish for that opportunity to spend with their parents because we all leave the islands and sometimes we leave our families back home and then we have our lives here in the states and then we don't get to spend time with our parents and yeah, it is such a blessing. I still have my father, but then I always look back at you know I lost my mom 2 years 3 years ago and sometimes you look back and regret not having that opportunity. I wish, right? We always say I wish. So such a blessing that you have the opportunity to spend with your parents. So Monterey, you know, do we call you Cali girl now since you've been there for a while?
I don't know if I even call myself that. I still feel very Tongan at heart, even though when I'm around Tongans, I feel very awkward. Um, you know, because I think my Tonganness in my mind is much bigger than my presence when I am amongst my own people. And so yeah, I don't know, but I do love California. I'm I feel like I'm proudly in this state and contribute to the state in the work that I do with the community here in California. And so I guess maybe I can add that to part of my descriptors. It's Cali girl.
There you go.
Yeah. So, Alicia, I have to ask you. I have uncles, aunties that have kids where all boys and one girl. How was that growing up, being the only girl surrounded by all boys?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I have five brothers. And
Mhm,
of course, my parents raised more than just our nuclear
mhm,
family, right? This is very common in our Islander cultures.
mhm,
But in my immediate family, I have five brothers, and it's a question that I'm asked a lot, especially from Palangis, because
mhm,
they just can't imagine number one such a big family, and then
mhm,
number two having so many brothers. But in our Tongan culture, sisters hold a higher position in the family, you know, there are terms for those and designated kinds of responsibilities, and so I grew up in that role because I have three older brothers and two younger brothers, and so I was in right in the middle, um, and you know, and I think being born into a family where there were already three boys that existed, I immediately, I think from I'm sure as early as I can remember being raised to understand my role as a sister in the family. And so even when I had two other brothers, I think my parents were, well, definitely my mom shares that they were trying for a girl so I wouldn't be alone. But I'm grateful for my brothers. They spoiled me. Um, my you know my older brothers took, you know, like did anything that I needed, and my younger brothers would take away from whatever my responsibilities are supposed to be. So you know, they relieved me of many things, and so I feel, and that's why I say I feel spoiled by them, because if I decided as a teenage girl that I would just like lounge on the couch and read all day, my younger brothers were the ones who picked up around me and took care of things and gave me so much space and grace to live into whatever I thought my potential was. Even as an adult, they continue to be that way. So it was an amazing
mhm.
childhood, and I feel really honored and blessed to have been raised among such loving men.
Awesome, awesome. Alicia, I learned that you or your family migrated to America when you're probably in your young teens. Just was it 13 years old?
13, yeah.
Wow. You know, as a 13-year-old, you know you're going through a lot of changes. And you know, your body, your mind, everything. And then you're talking about coming from a different culture into a whole new different world. Tell us about how that shift, uh, how did that come about for you? And what was your reaction and how did that impacted your life?
It was definitely a culture shock, you know. I think as anybody else experienced, and but I must say that my I watched a lot of like American high school movies. And I my favorite books were, you know, the Babysitters Club series
Yes,
and
the
so
collections. Yeah.
yeah, the whole Sweet Valley High. And so I
Yes.
feel like I in the islands, even growing up, I was imagining what teenagehood is for American girls, right? So
Mhm.
somehow I don't know. I thought maybe that I had immersed myself in that world from movies and books. I was an avid reader as a teenager, and so moving here, moving to Monterey especially, right? Because I imagine, you know, now in reflecting back as an adult, moving to Monterey was kind of the idyllic place and setting that you I would see in the movies, and it would be really similar to the kinds of family structures and community structures that I read about in the books. And
Mhm.
so I was like, oh, this was accurately America. You know, I like this is exactly how it was when I read in the books or what I saw in the movies, because it was predominantly white, you know, middle class affluent community, and I thought all of America was like that. So,
Mhm.
so I felt like I adapted well, I guess. I thought that's just what I thought. But um, I think when I think back on it, reflect on it as an adult, and I think about the things that I struggled with, it was a lot of adjusting. I
Mhm.
think my parents back home were part of a professional class in Tonga that, you know, kind of like the first generation of those that went through the entire formal education system in
Mhm.
Tonga and then went right into professional schools, right? My mom went to nursing school. My dad went to school in Fiji to become an
Mm.
accountant, and then they entered seminary, and so I think that in those exposures, my dad worked for you know, what is the equivalent of the Methodist Church in Tonga.
Mhm.
He worked for their administrative office, and so we were exposed to a lot of palangis, for example. So the home that we grew up in, the neighbor right next door to us was the house that like palangis that would come for like missionary work would live in, and so
Okay.
I was always tasked with the responsibility of playing with the kids, of going over to read to the elders. Sometimes it would be like
Mhm.
an elderly couple. So my parent, I was put in a position to really practice English a lot. And so even moving here, the language wasn't much of an adjustment because I was already using it in
Yeah.
school in Tonga and I had a lot of exposure. But I was unprepared. I think even to this day, I was unprepared for the society and the culture that is America. And so it was the first time that I came up against being treated differently, right?
Mhm.
Um I had always done well in school, for example, and so I was used to being treated well as a student. But I remember when we moved here, I went into the eighth grade because we moved here in December, and so I went into eighth grade for the last semester of it,
Mhm.
and struggled a little bit to understand how education was, right? I remember it was in a history class, and I didn't quite understand what they were talking about because it was mid school year. And I got yelled at by the teacher, and I just wasn't used to it because I was like, I didn't understand what I was supposed to do. But
Mhm.
she yelled at me as though I did something wrong. And I feel like it was the first time that I felt like I was just being put down because I had an accent. I didn't really fully understand the context of things in the classroom. Um, so that was the first time I experienced it, but then it made me look out for it much more. So I think that was probably the hardest adjustment for me, was
Mhm.
adjusting to American culture
Did you
Just
feel like
because.
you're being sheltered back because you didn't want to be a disappointment because you've been so used to being this child, more like a poster child back home, right? And then you come to America and then this happens and it kind of shelters you back because you don't want to be a disappointment or be an embarrassment. So,
It actually made me want to perform better in other
oh,
ways. So
good,
then like
good.
I became, I was already an overachiever, but I became even more aggressive overachiever, right? So
Mm,
even though that was in the history class, which I ended up hating history the rest of my education life. But
yeah.
then I poured myself into like math and sciences, which I really excelled at, because then I was like, if you don't like me in this class, well, I'm just going to show you that I'm a good student in my other classes. Um, and I think this like hyper resilience that I can now name it, but wherever I felt like I was mistreated, then I would try to overperform in other ways. It was
Mm,
as my way of like proving my worthiness, I think. But I think that's what I mean by like adjusting to American culture, was like finding ways to survive within it without even knowing exactly and defining what was happening at the time.
Yeah, I like what you said that sometimes I know when I first arrived in the states, when I joined the military, I also sensed that treatment, and also had my first experience of racism in the military by one of my fellow soldiers. So coming from Samoa, where you're the majority, and you've seen racism in movies, but then to experience it firsthand, I didn't think it existed in the military because I thought the military is where people came and you adjusted to army life and you share the same values. But to see that, because everyone's bringing that individual value from their families, so you get exposure for the first time, and now you're, like you said, you're awakened.
Hmm.
But then I've shared this similar story with like what you've said. um, they were seeking leadership positions within the platoon, and I remember them cycling through the leadership. And I've asked for an opportunity to lead because everyone else was getting replaced. And the drill sergeant looked at me and said, "You can't even speak English." But he was stereotyping me based on all the other Samoans that came before me, right? Had broken English. Most of them got kicked out because they couldn't take those types of criticism. So I just kind of let it go, and he blew it off. And then a couple weeks later, it resurfaced. More people getting replaced, and again, I asked, raised my hand, and he says, "What do you want?" And again, it was something within me that it motivated me to push further because I wanted to prove them wrong. Right? You just looked at me as an idiot. I'm going to prove to you that I can actually be better than the folks that you were assuming, could lead this group. So I like what you've mentioned there because there's something within us Polynesians that you know you stir us in the wrong way, or you rub us the wrong way, you're going to see the best of us come out of it. We're going to come firing. So
yeah.
appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. So I wanted to add also to, being in the environment that you are in. Monterey is exactly not the place where a lot of the Polynesian will be moving to. I know that with my mom's family, her siblings, and so this is like back in the 70s, they all moved to Compton, just in that area. So there was a lot of Polynesians, Samoans, all in the area. So what Monterey, I could just imagine because I had moved my family here to Texas in an area
Right.
where in Katy, there's like, you don't see Polynesians around here. And people ask me the question. So I'm going to ask you the question. Um, when did you realize that, hey, I don't see any Polynesians around here, but do we have any around the neighborhood or?
Yeah, we do actually. It's been a growing community here. We have a pretty good size Samoan, Tongan, and Fijian community,
Wow.
and even Chamorro community.
Mm,
I think the we ended up here because my uncle, my dad's younger brother, was in the army, and there's an
Okay.
army base here. I mean, it closed in the 90s, but he was stationed in Fort Ord,
Porter. Yeah.
here in Monterey. And in fact, you're right, Leaso. My father's side of the family, many of them migrated here in the late 60s, early 70s, and settled in Inglewood. So
Mm-hmm.
our foundation here in the US is in Southern California and is in LA. And in fact, my dad was the last of his siblings to remain in Tonga. And so, but he came out here quite often for family things. And I think my preparation in moving here to the US started early because my parents had worked on our immigration papers to come. And I think we had our green cards ready by the time I was in the third grade. And so it had been a talk in our family that we would move here because like I said, all of my dad's siblings were all here already. Um, but my parents delayed it and kept saying that they wanted to keep us back in Tonga to go to school for as long as possible.
Wow.
And so in that time, they became really familiar. They were like kind of looking for where to move us since we
Mm.
got all of our stuff. And we didn't move here until I was after Form 2 in high school in Tonga, which is like eighth grade, right? Like, so 5 years. So in that time, my parents were looking to move us, and they definitely decided that they didn't want to move us to LA,
Mm.
because, in the 70s, 80s, gang culture was big.
Mm.
Yes.
And many of my uncles who were in their teenage and 20s were in those gangs. And the main reason why my parents moved us was to afford us the opportunity to go to have higher education, because the university system there at the time, there was no university in Tonga. There was an extension of the University of South Pacific, and if you wanted to go to university, you needed to go overseas. And and oftentimes for Tongans, you afford an overseas education through a scholarship, and it's very
Mm.
competitive. And so, and many times within one family, all of the siblings who might get scholarships end up in different countries. So, they might be in New Zealand, another one in Australia, somebody in the UK, somebody in Europe, somewhere else. And my parents didn't want that to happen to us. And so our oldest brother received a scholarship to attend school in Hawaii, to what is now Hawaii Pacific University.
Okay.
And when it came time for my next brother to go to school, my parents were like, "All right, we're moving to America because the other one's already there." And so, and they decided to come to Monterey because they wanted to keep us away from the influences of
Yeah.
gangs and a lot of the
Mm.
things that a lot of my own cousins and uncles were caught up in, because of,
Mm.
as immigrants
Yeah.
moving here as new immigrants, you get wrapped up in a lot of the cultures that you migrate into. And so they wanted to keep us away from that, and Monterey seemed to be a safe place for that. They wanted us to really focus on our education, and they shielded us a bit moving us here. But that was why we ended up here. And there was
Yeah.
already a small Samoan community that had grown here because, wherever there's a military base, there's at least
Yeah.
a Samoan and Chamorro community. And
Yeah.
so, and then there was already a small Tongan community here. And we became a part of it. And it's a growing community. We're all very close, Tongans and Samoans. It's like just one big family. We all know each other and intermarry, um, and so you don't see a lot of the Samoan Tongan division that you see, for
Yeah. I like
example,
that.
historically in LA, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Before we go
Well,
to the next question,
mhm.
Leo, so can we?
Go ahead.
I just want to recognize our
Yeah.
viewers. We can pull some of these comments in. Okay, welcome Alisi and good evening, Pulse of Polynesia, and that's from Janet. Misepa. Hi guys. Yeah, Talofa Misepa. And
Oh, that's the.
hey, family. So that's from Fiatasi. Yeah, Talofa Lava Fia. And Sis Janet saying, hey, sis. So, okay. But I
Hi,
like what
everyone.
you've mentioned, Alisi, keeping the family away from the gang, even your own family members, right? So you're saying, hey, we love them, but then we also understand, that's not what we're here about, right? We're here, on strictly business, education. So we want to make sure that you guys are on that same route. But um, I have to ask, being in Monterey, and Monterey is about what, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours away from San Francisco and Oakland. What, are you guys Niners fans or Raiders fans or none?
I am in a family of Niner fans.
Okay, there we go.
And then we have one sole Raider fan and a Raven fan. So, but and all the kids have grown up just super Niners fans. So the proximity to San Francisco definitely definitely, like, we're definitely drawn into San Francisco fandomhood. Um, and less so Oakland. My one brother that is a Raider fan is also an Oakland A's fan.
Uh-huh.
And he's the only one that diverted from the flock. Everybody else are 49ers fans, Golden State Warriors fans, San Francisco Giants fans. Yeah.
My family lived in we lived in California for a long time, in Oakland and Hayward, and we didn't move back to Samoa until I think 82 or 83. So I'm just curious, maybe we crossed paths, because I know we went to Monterey a lot, for just for whatever reason. Our church had to go to Monterey, so a lot of good memories of when you said you came from Monterey. I started to think, oh man, I remember going to, I think it was Billy Graham revivals,
Oh,
in the Monterey area. So
yeah.
yeah, bringing back a lot of memories.
It's a
Growing up
beautiful
at
place.
church. No.
I feel lucky to call it home. I didn't like I really took for granted how nice it was here, until I went to college. And every time I mentioned that I was from Monterey, people would always say, like, wow, it's so beautiful out there. And I would say, I guess it's okay. And then I would come home and I would go, oh yeah, it is nice. People vacation here, I guess. So but then, I lived away from here for a while. I lived in LA for like 15 years, and every time I came home, I would have to make that drive along the ocean. Like, you just really miss
Mm,
Mhm.
the beauty of it, and it's such a small town. I appreciate the small townness of it.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a nice area.
yeah. Alisi, so I wanted to ask in regards to, as you were growing up, who was speaking life to you?
Mm. I think as the only girl in the family, I was lucky in I think it puts me in a very privileged position growing up, especially as a Tongan woman, and a Tongan sister, that I grew up with that being spoken into me by my parents. Like, I remember that from a very young age. And I think it's this confidence building that was necessary, that they felt was necessary for me to carry the role that I hold in my family. Because now as an adult, I recognize why they were building those solid solid foundation for me. And in turn, then I had brothers that I grew up who also did the same. And watched out for me in ways that I didn't for myself. Um, and I'm not saying that just like my biological brothers, is like all of the family that I grew up around. My parents raised a lot of children. I was among the young ones. They raised a lot. When I was growing up, when I was in elementary school, there were young adults living in the home that were working already, right? That my parents raised since they were in school. And so I think everyone that has grown up in that home that were older than me, um, also followed that example of like speaking life into me. And so I always had a high confidence level because of it, and alongside with like a sense of humility, because you were put in your place, right? Like
Yeah.
if you stepped out, if you were stepping out too much outside of that. But I appreciate I would say my parents did that, which is probably why as a young kid I was always worried about never being able to give back to them what they had poured into me, because I recognized that from a early age that they were building me for something, for a lot of responsibilities essentially. Yeah.
At least you have to ask. I've watched several podcasts, and I like it that you are very aware and you study a lot of the Tongan proverbs, and they're kind of similar
Mhm.
to Samoans, or Alanga Opus. And give me a proverb or Tongan proverb that describes you. Like what is a proverb that describes you the best?
Oh man, this is a proverb that is probably overplayed because it's one that I share all the time. It's my favorite one. And I try to get away from it, but I can't. I can't. And I think there's a similar one in Samoan. It's piki piki hama kai vai vai manava. Let's link our outriggers together so we can share life. Um, and I say that that's a proverb that describes me because having grown up in a home where it was understood that it wasn't just about me. Um, and in a household where, like cousins and uncles and aunts, and that the decisions that I made impacted everybody else. And so the proverb is about, um, it's really, it centers like people that go out to sea, at night, essentially, and the need that we always need to be prepared so that if anybody needs us, we're there and are able to give them a lifeline. And so, and it also speaks to the fact that to the need for us to stick together
Right.
and remain connected and not get too far away from things, so that if you ever need my help, I'm there, and if I ever need your help, you're there for me. It speaks to necessary unity, to be able to hold our family and beyond that a community together, that it's up to us to take care of each other. And so I think that probably because I've tried to live into that proverb, that I feel like it describes me the most.
Yeah.
So it's like it holds me accountable.
I love it. And
Yeah.
I guess the English equivalent would be something like bridging a gap, right?
Mm.
Mhm.
The outriggers. So Tongan to Tongan outriggers, we feel comfortable. You've connected. What about the Pacific outriggers? What were the challenges of making that connection? Because that's your line of work. What do you
Yeah.
see from our community?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think when I'm in the Tongans, when I'm among my own Tongan community, I feel so much intimidation of having to do things the right way and not knowing enough of the right way myself, that I
Mm.
feel so much more comfortable in mixed Pacific space. So I feel more comfortable among like Samoans and Hawaiians and Marshallese and
Mhm.
Chamorros and Fijian. Because there's a little bit, I feel like there's a little bit less pressure for me to know
Mhm.
exactly what I'm supposed to do. That is different from the pressure that I feel in just Tongan company.
I agree.
Yeah.
At least on the Samoa side, I know the pressure you're
Yeah.
talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So in my line of work, I, even like having grown up here in Monterey and amongst my family, I honestly here in Monterey, like although I didn't really learn about the larger community until I was in college.
Mhm.
Because even when we went to high school, we didn't even go to Monterey High School where where there were Samoans and other Tongans. We went to another smaller high school, which was just Palangis and just us. Like it was just us from our family. And so when I entered college, I went to the local community college, and I
Mhm.
was like, where did you all go to school? And like
And
I
you lived
became,
here?
yeah, I was like, you all have been here the whole time. Well, in
Yeah.
fact, they were born and raised here. They had been here the whole time. Like,
Mhm.
so I became really good friends with like the other, like with me, like the Samoans and the other Tongans that were around. And I was just much more drawn. I think I was just much more drawn to like the non-Tongan Pacific Islanders because there's less pressure for me to be proper, to live up to some expectation of being a daughter of somebody that holds a reverend title, for example, right? Um, and and so it helped me in coming into working in nonprofit. It wasn't necessarily, that wasn't my goal. I didn't even know what nonprofit was, but it wasn't my goal. But when I was getting ready in my education to apply to professional school, I I knew that I needed to learn more about Pacific Islander community because
Mm.
I'm an immigrant, right? Like I came here, I was born and raised in Tonga, and the community that I grew up in is not the community that is here, right? So the Tongan
Yeah.
community I grew up in is not the Tongan community here in America. Number one. And number two, I was not exposed to other Pacific Islanders having grown up in Monterey. And only being exposed when I went into college, it just felt insufficient. And so it was how, that is why I ended up in nonprofit, was because I was actually applying to medical school. And I remember writing my personal statements over the year. And I kept saying, I want to go to medical school because I want to help my people. And I
Mhm.
remember one time I was like, who, what am I talking about my people? Do I even know what my people needs? Am I just
Oh,
assuming that I'm going to help them? What if they don't need my help in the way that I think about it? Right. So I came to this like existential period, period where I was like, I feel like a fraud saying that I want to become a doctor to help my people when I don't think I know my people, or I know what my people need of me, or I even know how to help my people. So I was like, all right, I'm going to put my application on pause, and I need to go work in community. I just called it community. I need to go work in community so I can learn about Pacific Islanders and what they need so that I can be a good doctor.
is
And
this
then,
what your? I'm sorry, but is this something that your parents agreed for you to shift gears? Because you know how like for us Polynesian, our parents are like, I want you to do this, and I want you to like. For me, my parents wanted me to go a different route with my education. So when you decided to change, was there a discussion between you and your parents before you moved on to pursuing what you were pursuing?
no, there was not.
Mm,
In fact, my wanting to go to medical school was not what my, well, I would say it was not what my mom wanted. My mom is the more vocal of my parents. My dad is more like, whatever you decide to do your best at it. My mom was a nurse. She wanted me to become a nurse. And so for the first part of my education, I was actually going to nursing school, and I got into a program and I did it for a year, and I told them, I'm bored. I think I want to go to medical
mm,
school instead. In taking that direction, I did not discuss it with them. I just told them, I just did it. And they were worried because they were like, what are you doing? I thought you were gonna go on, this route. Um, and I told them, like, I wanna understand something, I wanna understand something better. But I think the thing that they didn't disapprove, for example, right? They didn't discourage me. They were worried, um, they didn't discourage me because one of the things that I grew up hearing in my life, and it was always told to my older brothers because they were older, but it was this, of course it's in Tongan, but they would always tell my brothers, go to school, come back, and be useful to the people, right? So like service, I felt was already drilled into my mind growing up because I would hear my parents tell my brothers that. And so I think my decision to go into community for them probably aligned with this advice they constantly were putting into us about going to school so that you'll have some use to the people, to the country, to
yeah.
the community. So when I told them I was going to go into the nonprofit for a couple of years, they were worried that I would never go back or that I wouldn't finish school, um, which that was partially accurate. I'm still here nonprofit. I ended up not going to medical school, but they're very proud that of the work that I have chosen to do now.
Mhm.
So yeah, luckily I didn't get discouraged for making that decision, but and then I had agency to decide to take that
Yes.
detour. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
I like
beautiful, being
the
able to have that free agency to allow you, and because of that, you have that confidence already instilled in you, so that the way that they raise you enough to have your own free thinking. So that's
Yeah.
beautiful. Mm. Sorry,
Yeah,
Arlington, go ahead.
I feel very lucky in that way. I
Yeah,
know that that's not always the case.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
no. I was just saying that it seems like our parents are always you don't it's like don't forget where you came from, and they always feel we're still attached to the islands even though we're gone. And I know recently, within a few months ago, my dad had that very talk with me, and he's pushing me. When are you going to go back home? When are you going to go serve your people, serve your village? You know, there's issues back home in the village in the church, but then the greater, Samoa, he's hearing because he watches all these news about home, and he's always looking at me. Like, sometimes I feel like he's telling me, "You haven't doing it. You haven't done anything for your people yet." And I always tell him, "Man, I feel like I'm doing enough. Is it not enough for you?" But I guess in his eyes, if it doesn't ties to back
Back
home,
home.
it's almost like pointless. Like,
Hmm.
show me your works belong home. We didn't bring you to come get your education and all the success that you have if you can't somehow link it back home. So yeah, I like how your parents have that same philosophy. Is you know
Yeah.
we're bringing you here, go get your education, but be mindful of what's going on back home and find ways to
Yeah.
contribute. Yeah.
Right. You're right. Like you have a greater responsibility. Yeah, that's really beautiful. I just watched this short documentary that PBS had about, American Samoa as a territory and this question around like birthright citizenship. And
Yeah.
one of the men talked about like this exact same thing, like having left Samoa to get educated. He was in the military, and then just feeling the sense of being called back home by his father to come home and serve the people.
Mm.
I think he was a lawyer, and then he moved
Oh,
back to Samoa. So,
yeah.
he was an elder, but I just it's such a beautiful, almost like bittersweet story of like remembering and coming back, even if you have this like desire to journey. Yeah,
Mm.
thank
Hmm.
you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I was invited by one of a Tongan sister that I met 3 weeks ago, and we were at Texas Roadhouse, and she was eating with her family. I was eating with my daughters on a separate table, and as I was leaving, we both turned to each other, and I'm like, "Are you Polynesian?" And she's like, "Yes, I am." And we both just started laughing and talking. But anyways, we were invited to a barbecue that they had, and by the way, this was like the first Polynesian I've seen in many years. So it's like
Oh.
every other year I would spot one person, either passing by or just moved here. But the husband and her has shared a story about how every time she leaves to Tonga, she leaves with bags of stuff. And then she comes back with just the clothes on her back.
Hmm.
When was the last time you visited back home?
I feel like has been the barrier for me going home more often. It's like you can't show up empty-handed,
Mm.
Yeah.
and not that people expect you to bring anything, but like you can't come home with nothing. Um and there's so many family that will show up to see you that you should be prepared to have something for everyone.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
And every
um
day too. Every day you're gonna have something for them.
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna bring food every day.
Yeah.
So but the last time I was home, oh man, I wish I could go home more often. The last time I was in Tonga was in 2019, during the summer but I was not in the main island where my family is. We actually flew from Fiji to Vava'o, which is one of the other major islands,
Yeah.
um, just to go because I'd never been there. Even growing up in Tonga, I had never been to that island. So there was
Mm.
an opportunity. There was a direct flight from Fiji to Vava'o. So I just flew there. We spent 5 days there, and then we flew back to Fiji and came home. But home, like home where we grew up, last time I was home was 2004, over
Mm.
20 years. And that was my first time home since we moved here in 1990. So it's huge gaps of time where I haven't gone home, and I wish, no, and in 2004, it was when my grandmother passed, who was in Tonga. And so we went home right before she passed and spent about a month there
Mm.
after her funeral. But that was the last time. And I was planning to go home this summer, but with everything that's going on, I have chosen to keep my Tongan citizenship. I have a green card. Um, Majority of my parents and my brothers, like most of them, already got naturalized and have become citizens, and I've chosen to hold off on it. And I was
Nice.
planning on going actually last month for my grandmother's younger sister's 90th birthday.
Mm.
And
Wow.
yeah, and then with everything happening around immigration,
Mm.
I decided not to travel outside the country.
Okay.
I always say like I should be fine, whatever, my
Yeah.
standing should be fine. But I'm fearful enough because I have a responsibility to my parents. And if anything happens to me and I end up being deported to Tonga for
Yeah.
whatever reason, then I would be leaving my responsibility to my parents. So I have not. I was so excited to go home this year, but um, yeah. So I haven't been back. I hope things change so there would
Right.
be an opportunity to go visit.
Oh yeah, I strongly understand that. I almost got stuck in American Samoa. I had a hard time getting from Hawaii to American Samoa. All the credentials and all the IDs, they didn't care about it. But it was to me, I thought it was stupid. It was my military leave form, which has no value, right? Just a
Right.
leave form, piece of paper that said, he's on military leave. I said, okay, I don't know what else to present you. Here's my military leave form. And it said, okay, that's good. I'm like, really? This paper's good? But all my ID cards, military ID, birth certificate, none of that's good to get on the plane to American Samoa. So getting there was one
And we're
thing. And
U.S.
then I had that
territory, by the
reverse
way,
issue.
which is
Right.
weird.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
Right.
almost got stuck there because they were like, okay, you don't have the paperwork to get back to the States. I'm like, again, here, birth certificate, I'm in the military, but yeah, I had to go through the same issue trying to get back from American Samoa. So yeah, I
Yeah,
understand what you're saying.
you just never know, right? Like especially
Yeah.
now it's just like, man, it's like luck of the draw almost, and I feel like the last few times that I have gone out of the country, I've gotten pulled into secondary screening every single
Oh,
time, and they don't tell me why, and then
yeah.
I always end up getting released after an hour or so. They
Yeah.
don't tell me what they were looking at or anything like that. They'll
Yeah.
just pull you into the room and you sit there and wait, and then they tell you, okay, you can go now.
Yeah.
um yeah, but I was just too fearful. I'm like, if anything happens to me, like what's going to happen to my parents? They're my
Right.
Yeah.
responsibility. So
Not worth the risk. Yeah.
yeah, it's not worth it. It's not worth it
Yeah.
for my pleasure, I can
Right.
Yeah.
wait.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Especially
I
when your
miss it.
parents. Yeah. It's amazing that, we spoke last night about your parents, and it's just now in this day and age, we don't see a lot of our Polynesian people reaching to that age.
Yeah.
And the fact that your parents are at that age and having their clash at the
They're
old age,
bickering.
yeah, they're bickering. It's just amazing. So they're being well taken care of, and they're not doing what other people would do, is not take care of themselves. So your parents, they're not
Yeah.
only are they well educated, but they're well informed enough to be disciplined, to be well taken care of.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, they're pretty good examples of like living healthy lives. But I don't know if any of our kids are learning from it. So, like my dad doesn't have gout, like they're very, we haven't
oh,
had red, like we don't, my parents stopped eating red meat like 25 years ago, like
Mm,
wow.
things like that. They eat a lot of greens. They still make a lot of their own food in a very Tongan way, and they don't eat out themselves unless one of us kids are like, let's go celebrate your birthday. And they're like, that's a waste of money. We can just
Mm,
make food here at home. But yeah, they're both retired and they're in their mid 80s. And I
wow.
know that their long lives is because they had chosen to make really healthy choices earlier
mhm,
on. So I feel really lucky they're still around, but I don't know how
Wow.
much we're learning as kids from them.
right. No, I remember
Mhm.
growing up, I never understood why my dad preferred fish over chicken. And
Hmm.
almost every day, like even when he did eat the chicken, he always says, go open up a can of mackerel. I'm like, oh man, mackerel, like of all choices, you prefer
You're like,
mackerel.
again?
But he
Yeah,
grew up on fish, so he just always, even to
yeah.
this day, he still is like fish. And I go to Walmart, get some bananas. I know he's always
Yeah,
telling my sister get like the healthy stuff.
that's the
I
same
say all
thing
that,
they
and I'm
do.
drinking Diet Coke over
Yeah.
here, like the worst
Oh,
choice of
yeah.
beverage.
I told Arlington that I quit, but mine's is hidden right there.
We're not
No,
even
they're
following
the
that.
same way. They still make their fish and greens and like bananas, manioc, like whatever. They still make it at least once a week. And that's their preferred food because they get sick of eating chicken. They get tired of eating chicken since they don't really eat like red meat. So
But
yeah.
you know what also is unique about your parents, just hearing about them retiring at the age of 80? I feel like I'm going to retire at 82. And I only say this because I tell my dad, like, I feel like if I stop working, my brain stops exercising in that sense, you know.
Yeah,
So
no,
wow.
I mean, my mom worked till she was 73, and my
Mm,
dad retired at 70. So my dad was retired for like 4 years before my mom was retired. Um, and I think if you left it up to them, my dad would still be working. I think that was during when the recession, and like he was working at a hospital, and they were trying to like offer packages for the older folks to retire or
oh,
ready to retire. So
Oh,
force them out.
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, and he
Oh,
took it and he was like, okay, fine, like I'm already old enough
I get
beyond
it.
beyond. So he took his retirement. But do you think this man stays like lives every no, he's the one that takes care of our church. So he's there every day. He takes care of like the elderly folks in our church, even though some of them he's older than them. He takes care of their gardens. He walks up and down our block, and there's like homes where there's like elderly. He'll like take care of their homes, take out their trash. He just doesn't stay home. My mom stays home, but she complains about him never being home. But it's because like you said, Lea, so like if for him, if he stays still, like his
Yeah.
mind, he needs to just,
He
he's
needs to be
always
moving.
reading. Yeah, he's
Hmm.
like reading the news all the time and asking me questions about how tariffs work, or he asked me about like
Always,
the political
yeah.
structure of the US,
Yeah.
history, things like that, because they didn't learn any of that stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah, I laugh
Wow.
because my dad says the same thing. I can tell he's been watching the news because he's asking me all these questions. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I didn't study, political science. I
yeah.
really don't follow politics, that closely. Let me give me a second while I pull up some of these comments. Like to recognize our viewers. So we got PMP. It says
Oh,
Malo Lele.
yes.
Oh,
Then
malolele.
we have Des from Des says he was here. So Malo Des. Uh, and Christine, hi from New Zealand. And then Christine says, eat
Ooh.
silver beet. Okay.
I don't know
I
what
love
silver beets
beets.
is, but I'll look it up.
I know I'm like I love beets, but I don't. I'm gonna have to figure out what silver beet is.
Yeah,
Sounds
yeah.
good.
So, Alisi, let's jump into your education, right? Because I could see how what you decided to major in college connects to the next step in your life. You got into biochemistry and cell biology. Tell us about that.
Um, I I don't know when I started to really love the sciences, but I
Mhm.
now that I was talking about it, I think it became a safe space for me moving
Okay.
here to the US. Because I remember I think after a month being here, I was like I was student of the month in my math class in the eighth grade. And so like I just leaned into it, you know. My science teacher, I remember in eighth grade, he had to recommend what high school science we were allowed to get into as freshmen. And I remember him telling me that I could get into like the highest level of science that was allowable for freshmen just
Okay.
because of like what he saw in his class. And so I don't know if like I decided that I was going to be very good at this because I really loved it, or if it was because this is where teachers were really pouring into me. Here was I was getting encouraged by my math and science teachers because I did well in those classes. I did well in my other classes too, but it seemed that these were the areas where I was encouraged the most. um and so I just leaned into it. I In high school I took all the sciences and however much math I could get into. And in fact, my senior year I ended up taking my math classes at the community college because I had already taken all the math in the high school. But I think what I really liked about math and science was, for me, it was a safe space because I didn't need to know history of the US. I didn't need to know
Mhm.
politics or government or even the social sciences. Like, you have to
Yeah.
have some context of society here, right? To be able to form opinions or be a critical thinker around issues.
Mhm.
Science and math were safe for me because it was just very matter of fact. Like, these are the things that you need to know, and that's all it is. Like, you don't even have to form opinions around it.
Mm.
Um, and I think that, like, that felt comfortable enough for me, and I just really leaned into it. I love studying, and I just studied a lot of
Yeah.
those. So then but well, like I said, like I when I started college, I was a nursing major because my mom wanted me to be a
Yeah.
nurse. And so it was fine because I was already like, I enjoyed anatomy and physiology and microbiology. I enjoyed all those classes and I did well in them. But when I ended up going to I entered nursing school at San Francisco State. And then after a year, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I think I want to become a biology major.
Mm.
Because I was still so hungry for science. And in nursing school, you were already starting to learn about like nursing practice, and your science education kind of is slowed a little bit more, right? Like, you're of course you study like pathophysiology, but I felt like I was seeing an end to that journey once I finished nursing school, and I didn't want it to end yet. So even
Okay.
when I was in the nursing program, I started to take a physics and biology undergrad class in college, and
Really? Okay.
really enjoyed it. And so my mom was so upset when I told her that I was going to leave the nursing program and move to San Diego, where my cousin was going to school, because I want to study pre-med. So yeah, and then I when I tried to get into the university, I ended up just getting into their biochemistry, which I absolutely loved. It was
Yeah.
delightful. And yeah, it was fun.
Was any of
Alisi.
that,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
was any of your mom's hesitation part of their, um, how would you put this, lack of confidence? Because, it was an area that they pursued. Did they feel that it was an area that stick with this, for now. Maybe you're not prepared for, those tougher subjects. I'm just speaking from my experience, 'cause I get that a lot from my parents.
Yeah.
They had their comfort zone, but they never really wanted to venture beyond it, and they felt like this was their limit, and they almost try to hold you at their limit. And I think I was always
Mm.
rebellious in nature to say, not to disrespect what they were capable of, but it was one of those things that I feel like I can challenge myself a little bit to go a little bit further than what you guys have attained. Was there any of that you think your mom probably was more reserved in you pursuing beyond nursing?
Yeah, my mom's hesitation I know was a very practical one. She
Hmm.
wanted me to she wanted me to get my RN so I could have a guaranteed job, because that job market, you will always have a job. Because she always said, I know you want to go to medical school, but you can go get your RN and be a nurse, and then you can continue into medical school if you decide that you want to do that. But at least you will have secured a career
I see.
that pays well. It was a very practical
Hmm.
hesitation. And of course, like, I think I was like 19, 20.
Yeah.
I'm sure she was like, and you're just making these rash decisions. What do you mean you're leaving the nursing program? It's hard to get into a program. So I think it was that. It was my parents are very practical thinkers,
Hmm.
and I am more on like the dreamer, like idealistic kind of thinker, imagining things that doesn't exist kind of
Yeah.
thinker. And that didn't always fit into. They're like, that makes no sense. So
Yeah, but in the end, it worked out overall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I still hear them tell the grandkids, go into nursing. Your auntie decided not to go, and she's working in nonprofit now. And I'm like, thanks. Thanks. I'm making a difference though. So,
Right.
and I'm also
Yeah.
like able to make enough of a living to be okay right now. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah.
So I have to ask you because we're about in the same age bracket like we talked about last night,
Yeah.
and we were going to college at the same time in different places and stuff, and I was actually distracted so many times and influenced. And I tell my kids, I don't sugarcoat anything from my kids. I tell mom was really bad back in the day, and I had to repeat some of those classes I failed. How did you manage to stay focused amongst all the challenges and the temptations and the influence behind you?
I did not stay focused.
Okay.
It seemed I did. I think I was always a good student. I prided myself on being a good student because I knew that at the very least I will not disappoint my parents when it comes to school. Um, but I also, like I said, like, I'm kind of like a free spirit. Like, I think I want to do this thing now.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily go the straight line. And this is always my advice to younger people. It's like, whatever you think your life is going to be, it's not always going to be that straight line. You might still get to the destination, but it might take some curvy roads. But because I was supposed to go to nursing school, and then when I left the program, I didn't even like withdraw or anything. I just didn't take my finals. It was a little bit reckless. But once I decided, and then I ended up getting married. In the midst of that, I got married at 23. And also, there was also another thing that was like, really, I was not anybody that thought that I was going to get married that young anyway, but then I ended up getting married. So then and then I went back to the university, and I just, once I got into, got back into it, it was like, all right, there's no playing around. And I actually, in 3 years, I got my bachelor's and my master's, because I got into an accelerated joint bachelor's master's program where I did my last year of undergrad together with my first year of my master's program. So I only had to do an additional year once I got my bachelor's. So I know that, like, when I dial in, like, I lock in.
Yeah.
But I definitely was like distracted. I was definitely
Yeah.
distracted.
Well,
So
good, because it makes me feel like I'm not alone.
no.
I think that was my sophomore year, like my freshman and freshman, actually, closer to my junior, my freshman sophomore year. The military was paying for my classes, and I didn't want to lose the anything or get kicked out because I was gonna lose my GI Bill. So I was so laser focused. But then I got bored, and then I was like, okay, what else can I do? Let me go play rugby. Let me go join a fraternity, and guess what? The grades start going this way. But I
Yeah,
wanted to
and
have fun. I didn't want to. I wanted to have the college experience, and I just felt like you only experience this once. You're only young once, so live it.
yeah, and that's really what you have to do anyway, right? Like I think this idea of just, it's fine if that's what people want to do, but also as immigrants, I think having adjusted to so many different kinds of things, college offers an opportunity for a kind of growth that you don't get at home, right?
Yeah.
You don't get really anywhere else. So I'm always encouraging my nieces and nephews, like, go to college, just go for the experience, you
Yeah.
know, because it's a time in your life where you really are starting to lock in on like what is important to you, and to be able to experience that on your own, I think is a beautiful opportunity for growth. And
Mhm.
so, and I'm like, take a year, take a gap year, go travel. Yeah, I'm sure my brothers and my sisters-in-law don't appreciate that. I'm like, just enjoy.
Yeah.
Go join a take join an intramural sports team,
Right.
and
Yeah.
do the things on campus. It's kind of an experience you don't really get any other time in your life, because even if you go to college later on, you have acquired some responsibility, and you can't afford the time to be able to live into those things. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
But of course, as
So,
Islander parents, they're gonna call that like mama taimi, like you're just wasting your time over there.
and I could see like with no matter what period of your life you're having your family, why anybody would think otherwise. And telling your child, the times have changed and temptations are different,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so the path is, it depends on. And I feel like the more the generation comes through, it's the harder it becomes, and
yeah,
the stronger that they are, right? And so and that's why like your nieces and nephews are very lucky to have you, because I feel like you're such an inspiration. If Auntie can do this, we could do the same thing too and be
yeah.
able to persevere. And that leads me to the other question I wanted to ask while you're in college, because as we're in college, you mentioned too that you got married young and then things change. And so your mind is at that point. You have so many different things going on in your mind. Did you ever at a time feel like, is this the right path that I'm taking? And when did you
um
realize that, when you graduated, like, okay, this is this,
yeah.
I've done what I needed to do. Mhm.
Yeah, I think my college journey was the one thing that I knew for sure in my life that I would achieve. Even if I was going to get married, even if I was going to like drop out of my nursing school and do something else, I knew that I was going to finish college. In fact, as a 48-year-old, I still have in my mind that I'm going to get a PhD. So school is the thing that I enjoy the most. I love to learn, and I love to open my mind to new things and new ways of thinking and exploration. And so that's I there was never a doubt in my mind that I was going to finish school. So even though I got married, school was actually always more important than that. Which is probably what you know. But I enjoyed it, and so for those 3 years that I was in my um, at the university, I did everything. I TA'd as an undergrad. At the time, I finished my undergrad in 2003, and at the time, for example, like undergrad, your TAs were always either in a master's program or in a PhD program. I was part of a cohort that actually TA'd upper division science classes as
Wow.
undergrads, and so I TA'd for structural biochemistry class. nerd out. Like I
Yeah.
loved to just like nerd out with my group of friends. And because I was a transfer student, I was like 1 or 2 years older than like the traditional students. And there were a few of us that were transfer students. And most of us were students of color. And we were all just become really good friends. We were all science majors.
Mm.
We formed this
Mm.
like group of friends, and all of us studied together, and people would want to like join our study group. So I made a whole
Yeah.
thing out of like being in college at that time. Um, and really like learned I this is where I also became really politicized and learned a lot more about you like the history of the United States with regards to Pacific Islanders and Pacific Islands. So this is where I learned a lot more about like the territories and the history of that, and Hawaii and the history of the overthrow. Um, so I alongside my science education, which really empowered me as a student, I also was exploring like what does it mean to be Pacific Islander
Mhm.
in this space. Because I went to school in San Diego, there were very few of us on campus at UC San
Mhm.
Diego. It was like me and two other people that were Pacific Islander. There, I think there, that's not fair. There were Native Hawaiians that were there, but many of them like kind of stayed to themselves.
Mhm.
Mm.
Um, but it always made me wonder, there's a large Pacific Islander community in San Diego. Why are there only a handful of us here? So like grappling with a lot of those things made me think a lot about like what does it mean to be Pacific Islander here, and what is my role? What role do I play in that larger community of our people?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't now I've forgotten the question you asked, and I don't know if I answered it.
Arlington, did
Yeah,
you want
you
to
did answer.
go ahead?
Sorry. Yeah, we had some questions that were fired in here. They look pretty interesting. Okay. Okay, so this one's from Michaela Smith. I always see you in community gatherings. As a leader, are there islanders in the community we should look to for wisdom and guidance, especially when it comes to unifying us in the current climate?
Oh wow. Um, Thank you for that question. I was mentored into this work by some of our elders, and most of them have passed away. So I'm just gonna, naming Uncle Ka'ivi Pang and Auntie Ka'ala Pang. They started an organization called Pacific Islander Health Partnership in Orange County, California, and that continues to exist. Uncle Ka'ivi has passed away, but was instrumental in, the creation of the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander census category. That was part of his legacy and work he did with Senator Akaka and a lot of our Hawaii delegation in Congress. Um, and, Auntie Cowan Young, who just passed away in 2021. And so I think in community right now, because I have been in nonprofit for a while, we have a lot of elders in the community, but many of them are not necessarily within the nonprofit sector. I would say that there are some like really prominent folks that I look to, and it's funny because I still see myself as a young person, even though I'm now considered one of the almost elder. I tell them like an elder title is you have to earn it, and I have not earned the elder title yet. So I know I have white hairs already, but like I have not earned the elder title. But I would say some of the folks that I really look to in community are out of Hawaii, Dr. Sherry Daniels, Kamana Opono Crab, Dr. Crab, some of the Native Hawaiian leaders. Um, I think here in California, Papali'i, Manufo, Liainga, Anoa'i out of San Francisco,
Mm.
Dr. Patsy Tito, who leads the Samoan Community Development Center, are some of the folks that I really look to. Ualani Ho'opai, who now runs Pacific Islander Health Partnership, Auntie Audrey Kawaiapua Alo from the Hawaiian community. And then, but I would say like there are a lot of younger people that I really look to. Dr. Reverend Dr. P.K. Thompson out of the Congregational Church, Dominguez Congregational Church in Compton, is somebody that I really always look to, like his words for wisdom. And some of our younger leaders, Teresa Siangatonu is a spoken word artist out of the Bay Area.
Mm.
Um, and there are a lot of folks that are younger than me that I look to as leaders because of they just have a fresh wisdom and a lot more
Mm.
immersed in what's going on here and what young people are going through. And so I look to a lot of them, but those are some of the names that come like top of mind for me. And if I want to go super young, some of the Alina Fa'aula, who runs the Oakland Pacific Islander Network, that do school-based work in Oakland.
Oh,
It's a
nice.
brilliant young leader. Reno Anua'i, who
Mm.
does a lot of environmental justice work. But yeah, I think those are some of the folks that come to mind. And of course, I must say Moni Pili over at Lengafa.
Yeah, we can't forget about Moni.
No, for sure. I actually took the Samoan language class
Oh,
during the pandemic,
Yes.
and I mean I knew Moni already, but Moni would always pick on me to like read things. So I was like, Moni, so I'm Tongan, but he just has so much fun. Like, Alisi, what does this mean? Because of our culture is so similar, and
mhm.
Yeah.
yeah, those are the names that come to mind.
Oh.
I feel bad I left out some people, but
Oh no, that's a long list of names, and
Mhm.
I know a lot of folks will appreciate that, and they also understand because there's so many people that are involved in the community. So if your name was left off,
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure you understand, why.
Mhm.
And we can go all night naming them. And Mikaele
Yeah.
also says, you always are inclusive. Malo pito
oh,
alisi. There's our word we asked about.
oh, thank you. I
Mhm.
appreciate that.
So we have another question here. Question to you, or some more culture. We need more education, but being entrepreneur. So that's from Alaska Outdoor. Some more Samoa entrepreneur and education. Okay, I'm very
Somewhat.
proud of a lot of Polynesians becoming professional athletes in NFL. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, I
Mm,
agree.
Mhm.
yeah. We also have a lot of entrepreneurs. I almost feel like after the pandemic,
Mhm.
there was like a swell, an upswell
Hmm.
of small businesses,
Mhm.
even like micro businesses. People were
Right.
just starting like online things. And we have a small business support program at our organization. And we've been like tapping into all of the Pacific Islander owned small businesses in our Southern California region. And we are barely scratching the surface. Our people are so talented and are so good at like bringing our culture into some of the work that they're doing. It's just really beautiful, and I'm constantly inspired by them.
Yeah, and one of the things, like you've mentioned, Alicia, is the entrepreneurial spirit is there. The challenge
Mhm.
is to how do you make a product or service that is distinguishable from each other without replicating, and then we cannibalize each other's business because I'm doing the same thing you're doing and you're doing the same thing you're doing. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm always watching the news and I see some young kid that's probably 5 to 7 years old created some sock and sock toy and is making millions. And
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, the
Yeah.
creativity is there. You just have to explore. You never know what hits.
Yeah. And, to your point, Tasi, one of the really beautiful things that I just saw recently is some of our younger businesses that are in, like, say, for example, in like party planning and, that realm. I've seen Pacific Islander businesses partner where they will say, what both of them individually are too small to take on a client, but they'll come
Mm,
together and like do like a big event together,
I see.
and take on a client together. Or maybe somebody does party supplies and then somebody does decoration or whatever, and
Mm,
then they'll partner. So then one will do the one and the other company will do the other. And so I saw
Yeah.
that really recently, and it's like younger people, and I'm like, wow, that's just beautiful. And I feel like that's a spirit
Yeah.
of our culture. It's like what I'm good at, what you're good at, let's bring it together. And I think that's a model that could be really helpful rather than like
Yeah,
competing.
I love that. It's a win-win for all of us, right?
Hmm.
It's not like,
Yes.
oh, I'm gonna steal the business and then I'm gonna push you out of the picture, and then
Right.
now you're
Yeah.
struggling and I'm up here. Yeah, love
Yeah,
it.
because they talk about how like there's so much work that there's enough for everybody. So
Yes.
partnerships like can really maximize their ability to deliver on their work.
Well, I'm going to switch gears on this, and we're going to talk about what you said before in a different podcast. You said, if we don't exist in the data, we don't exist in the policymaker. When did this become real for you? And I love that what you said.
Yeah. So I think because I was always a huge math person, like I also want to credit my dad for that. My dad used to be a math teacher. In fact, he spent a couple of years teaching math in Samoa in his younger years when he was a teacher. But I think my love for numbers comes from him. And so I've always loved data, also
Mm,
probably because of my science background. So when I came into this work, one of the fights that our elders were holding was this fight for data for our community
yeah.
because historically our data has always been subsumed under the Asian and Pacific Islander
Mhm.
category, so API. And so some of the work that many of our elders contributed to, I also must name Pat Luce, who's passed on, and June Poesi, who runs the Office of Samoan Affairs. We're part of a group that really helped to create the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander data category, which we saw for the
Mm,
first time on the 2000 census.
wow.
Um, and that was part of a fight for visibility because of
Yeah.
resources. Because if we don't have the data to say this many of our people are in the country and these are the things that are important to them, then the federal government has no way of justifying providing resources and financial resources to those communities.
So can I ask, the reason why we weren't being able to be visible is because we were combined together with Asian
Right,
Pacific.
right, right. And
Okay.
so whenever resources went to the API community, we didn't know who the PI was in that. So it
Huh.
didn't always reach our community.
Mm,
So oftentimes it would go to like a large Asian API organization that was Asian led and Asian focused. And that's not to say that everybody's like that, because many of our strongest allies and champions now are from the Asian American community and understand the need for our community to have our own data scene. So I would say one of the places where that came most alive for me was during COVID.
Mm.
mm,
Um, and because we are significantly smaller population than any other racial group, um, our data wasn't being reported. And so one of the sparks that really got our COVID work going here, not just here in California, but nationally, because we had a national network addressing COVID for our community, was a reporter from a Sacramento newspaper sent us some
okay.
data and said, hey, this data is showing that Pacific Islanders have the highest, if you look at population rates, right, it looks like Pacific Islanders have the highest infection and the highest death rates. And she was basically saying, like, is this true? Are you seeing this? And it
Wow.
came at a time where many of us that were in nonprofit were hearing the stories, right? Like, oh, so and so passed away, or this certain person, like so many people are, this entire family sick. And we were hearing it, but we didn't have the data to really speak to what was happening until that reporter came to us and said, hey, we're seeing this data, is this true? And this was state level data, this was California data. And we were, and all of us that were together in this time were like, we believe it because we're hearing it and it feels real to
Yes.
us, but we don't know if it's true because
Wow.
we don't have the data. And so when that was brought to us, that was one of our first priorities around our COVID work, was to advocate for our data to be made available. And the first place we went to was to the LA County Department of Public Health, because we actually had a close relationship with their chief science officer who was in
Okay.
charge of all of their data stuff, because there was no data reported from LA County on our community. And so we asked him, why isn't our data being reported? And he said, your numbers, your death numbers are under our threshold. You have to have at least
Mm,
11 deaths in order for us to report it for
wow.
privacy reasons. And I think at the time there were like 6 deaths reported in LA
Mhm.
County from our
Yeah.
community. And we appealed to him, and we basically told him, we cannot afford another death.
Yeah.
We cannot afford to reach
Right.
11 for our
Yeah.
community to know that this is happening in higher rates in our community. And he lowered the threshold. And he was like, I hear you, this is important. So I think like the first set of data that were reported was when we had 6 deaths. And every week since then, the head of the LA County Department of Public Health, in her weekly news report, included our NHPI data. So then when we did that in LA County, we took the same talking points and we went and talked to other neighboring counties, to their departments of public health, and asked for them to also report our data separated from Asian American and
Wow.
also report it publicly. Um, and that made a huge difference in our ability to talk to our community about, like, this is why you're seeing higher rates in our community, because we live in multifamily homes, we live in multi-generational homes. So if one person is sick, likely the whole household is going to be exposed to it, right? So it informed our strategies, like what kind of resources we needed. We needed resources to isolate people, so we had hotel vouchers, we had food resources where we could deliver food to
Wow.
families so that they didn't have to leave, things like that. It really helped to inform our work to be able to help our community. We were one of the first. We also, interesting you brought up, Lea, so that we don't have a lot of elders that live into their 80s.
Yeah.
And when California first announced that, like, the vaccination, the first batch of vaccinations was gonna focus on elderly and the workforce. And in order for you to get it, you had to be 75 and up, right? These were that's how they prioritized it. We had to
Yeah.
talk to our counties to tell them we don't have a lot of people that are 75 and over. Our
Yeah.
elders, if they need to lower the threshold for our community, otherwise those that we call
Wow.
elders are gonna be gone, because it's, can they lower it? And so they lowered it to 65 for us.
Interesting.
Um, but that was because we were able to give them the data about, like, the age groups in our community. But that's how I think, like, those are examples of, like, why we need our data, because they tell more accurate stories of what our community is experiencing.
Right. I wonder if, because this is only in California, can you imagine in other parts of the states? Like, there's a
Yeah, I
lot
mean,
of
we
numbers. Yeah.
we had a national coalition that was doing COVID response. So we coordinated across the country. And so what we were doing in California was shared with our
Yeah.
organizations across the country, so that they were able to talk to their state and county officials. Hawaii ended up forming an entire data team in Hawaii that really looked at, because we don't have a lot of Samoan and Tongan organizations in Hawaii, believe it or not. So it was the Native Hawaiians that really, like, brought in Samoans and Tongans to help inform the work they were doing. And so they built out a whole data infrastructure in Hawaii that was just like no other state had that. So, but it required us working together and communicating so that we could share this is what we did in California. Here, take it. Here's the data we used. Use the same talking points, and so we were able to mobilize across the country.
Quick question. Um, Looking back at COVID and the issues that we seen, at least in the Pacific Islanders, there was a constant clash in faith versus science, right? So was there a challenge in getting some of our faith believers to participate in the vaccinations? And that did that also contribute to probably some of the higher numbers? Because I've heard it a lot even within my own family. my parents were like, just trust, believe in God. We don't need that vaccine. And it frustrated me a lot of times because, here are my parents, 70s and 80s who had that philosophy, as long as I pray, I don't need that vaccine, and I always believed in the vaccination. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I'm sure that that existed in, but in my experience, the we worked closely with church leaders who were invested in bringing this information to our community. And in fact, many of our churches opened up their venues for vaccine distribution, for testing, and for food distribution. We did a lot of our church leaders partnered with us to deliver a lot of that. And I think for them, for our church leaders, they were seeing firsthand because they had to conduct the funerals.
Hmm.
So they were seeing the reflection of what we were seeing in the data because they were the ones who had to go to the funerals. We for some of our church leaders, we had to ask for them to be in we had to ask for our church leaders to be included in the priority vaccination because they weren't considered essential workers, and we advocated within for our counties in Southern California to include faith leaders because they're conducting visits to families, funerals, right? They still have to do it because those are culturally for our community.
Yeah.
You can't avoid having, like the traditional, some of our traditions. So our church leaders were actually prioritized in receiving the vaccines, so we didn't really come up against that, but I'm sure it existed. But in fact, our church leaders stepped up in big ways during COVID, creating space, like allowing us to use spaces. Whenever we had information, we gave it to them. Some of them were features in many of our PSAs that we got out to the community. Many of them, in fact, put on, like conversations about COVID on internet radio on their own, without necessarily anybody else. Like they would have like three or four church leaders, and they'll come and they'll discuss it, and they'll invite me to come and give an update on what we're seeing in the data. But I think that actually saved many lives. Is
Yeah.
Yeah,
that
because I think
many of our
before
church
the
leaders? Yeah.
COVID
Yeah.
outbreak, I think it was in Samoa, not American Samoa, they had a measles outbreak. I think
Yeah.
just shortly. I think it was around September, towards December timeframe before COVID hit the next year, and it was the same thing. The
Yeah.
rumors got around there was a bad batch, and more kids were dying because of the vaccination. So a lot of the islanders said, hey, stop, don't get vaccinated. And then the rates of the death was rising.
Yeah.
So I think they finally were able to persuade the people, get your kids vaccinated, and then they finally had control over it. But then that sort of you know lost its momentum because that's when COVID picked up, and we sort of forgotten about the measles outbreak in Samoa. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that. And I think because many of us were also following that. And I would say this for some of our Samoan faith leaders, I think a lot of them stepped up because having watched that happen, I don't think any of us were willing to see the devastation within our families, even though we were still hit hard. But I think it could have been much worse if we didn't have the leadership. And so I really applaud our church leaders because they have much more credibility than we do in community. And they are in charge of so many more people. And so when they stepped in, they set an example for our community that I say saved a lot of lives.
Yeah. I guess I would say some, and I only say that because
Yeah.
where my parents were going, they were getting a lot of misinformation from in their church, and
Mm,
that's what it bothered me the most was the church members were telling my parents, you don't need it, and I'm here. I'm like, oh my God, I can't even convince my own parents because my parents are closer to God, than their own son. So, like, how do you
mm,
you talk your parents out of that? But they've had COVID several times, and they made it
mm.
past COVID. So, glad it worked out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, given all that you've experienced these past, years with the events that took place, the tragic event that took place with COVID, what is in place to be prepared more now that you guys got this taken care of as far as using data and trying to separate Polynesia so that we could have our
Mhm.
own identity? What is in place for you guys to prepare for the next hit that
Yeah.
hopefully does not come?
Yeah, hopefully nothing like this happens. and
Yeah.
and I and that's a great question, because it is actually what we're currently trying to do, is what lessons did we learn from COVID that we can build into our work, so that should anything like this similar happens, that we are prepared, that we have the infrastructure of support and care
Right.
to be able to take care of our communities. The we During the pandemic, we actually created the National Pacific Islander COVID Response Team,
Mhm.
and that's the national coalition that I was talking about. Um, and as part of that, we also created the Southern California Pacific Islander Community
Mhm.
Response Team, SoCal PICRT.
Mhm.
One of the ways that we're doing this is that we have stayed on, because we only came together as a coalition to respond to COVID, and it was supposed to just
Mm.
like do COVID stuff and then
Put
sunset
it
and like
down.
everybody go back to doing their stuff. But we have stayed on as an organization partially because we didn't, there was not a social service, direct service organization serving our community in LA County. And LA County has the largest
Wow.
population of Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders of any county outside of
Wow.
Hawaii. So that huge gap of
Yeah.
service is a disservice to our community.
Yeah.
So we've stayed on to help to build the infrastructure of support through SoCal Pickard. So that's the organization I'm with now. Another thing that came out of the pandemic is, oh, before I go to that, so not just SoCal Pickard, but we came together as a coalition of like 20 Pacific Islander serving organizations in Southern California. And we continue to meet as a coalition. We meet twice a month still. We used to meet weekly, but COVID's not happening in the degree that it did. So we meet twice a month. We continue to share resources. We bring in funding to build up capacity for some of our smaller groups. Um, and we're continuing to build our coalition so that we have a strong, united body. And then we are I'm already being summoned. And then, but it's, but and then, so I think that, because I think that that's part of what we need in community. We just need we need our coalition to be strong enough that if anything happens,
Yeah.
we know that we can go to each other and like figure something out, rather than go like, oh no, we don't know who to talk to. So
Right.
yeah, so that foundation we continue to invest in. The other really great thing that came out of the pandemic is the creation of the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander Data Policy Lab, which is the first of its kind for any ethnic or racial group. And that's based out of UCLA Center for Health Policy Research. I
Mm.
worked over there for 2.5 years just to kind of build up its infrastructure, but their work is focused on data policy, data systems, making sure we have our data, and advocacy around data.
Wow.
So data is so important to representing our community and to speaking to our needs, that we have our own entity that is focused on just data work. And so um, they've already done tremendous work, and we continue to work really closely with them. But I think third and last, one of the things that really came out of the pandemic is we have so many organizations. And I would say across California alone, there are over 60 Pacific Islanders serving nonprofits
Mm.
and groups. I mean, they might not have their 501c3, but they exist and they do work to serve community. And that's not counting churches. That's not counting some of our like athletic clubs. Those are just like almost, service arts organizations. So, and many of us are aware of each other. And if I need something in the Bay Area, I know who to reach out to. I
That's
think
good.
that infrastructure of relationship is something that is necessary for strengthening our
Mhm.
community, to be prepared for anything that happens. And we're trying to do that same kind of building across the country. I know that,
Yeah.
I am a board member for the NHPI Alliance, which is a national organization. And, on our board, we have someone from Hawaii, somebody from Utah, and we're trying to build that out because we also recognize that we can build strength locally, but we also need strength nationally, to speak at the federal level about
Mhm.
our community and continue to create visibility there. So, and also bring some of the issues that are we don't always talk about. Like, we're really trying to figure out, like, how do we build work that supports our veterans, because we have a high veteran population,
Mhm.
people that have contributed to our communities in many, many ways that deserve our care also. And so, you know, are we building around services for our veterans, our elders, our children? So we're trying to figure out, like, how to be as useful as possible.
I love that.
So
That's amazing. And,
I
it goes right back to what you just said. Without data, we don't exist,
Yeah.
truthfully. And I'm sorry, Arlington, you were about to say something. Go ahead.
yeah, I seen you were on a panel, and I think it's called Koviki, right? Is
Mm.
that something that's still going on now?
No, I think Koviki Talks, that was it used to be hosted by Carl and Naki over Pacifica by Design.
Okay,
I think that might have been funded by the CDC. It was like some of the work that was funded by federal government and, COVID dollars. So a lot of those have gone away.
I see.
Yeah. So yeah, some of this work also depends on funding, and which is another reason why we need data, and we can't get funding without proving that the need is there. So um, and I think, like, we're facing a really unique challenge right now in
Hmm.
our sector because of the funding cuts at the federal level. So a lot of research dollars are gone, and which is, you know, our contribution to, for example, like health research is one of the ways that we're able to generate data, looking at our communities, mental health, for example, looking at our communities' cancer rates. And so with a lot of that funding going away and a lot of funding that is focused on specific ethnic groups, right? Like, around a lot of the anti-DEI narrative has also dismantled a lot of targeted support for, say, like Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, right? Because so now, under like anti-DEI things, a lot of those things have gone away. So we're trying to be creative and figure out ways that we can continue to appeal and make the case for our community, that fits under the current definitions and policies. But it's definitely a unique time to be in this sector.
Yeah.
A lot
And
of
you know what
impact. Yeah.
yeah. You know what I really love is hearing the fact that just our community coming together to make things happen and coming up with ideas like, hey, if you have this strength and I have this, and we can make a bigger bond to help whatever we can in those areas. Now I want to ask you something. Um, I mentioned this to you last night about how it's so hard to duplicate a person such as yourself, right? So, with all that's going on, is the success that you have worked together with your team to bring to all this to come to fruition. What do you do like to restore you?
um, I sleep. I love
Like
sleep.
today?
Like today, I was trying to be productive today, and then I ended up just sleeping all day. I just felt so tired. Um, but I think restoration for me is definitely like trying to get back into running. That was
Yes.
always so meditative and has so many impacts, right? And I think hanging out with my nieces and nephews, is also always really invigorating, and just laughing at the ways that they talk and the ways that they think. And I'm like, you all are so quick. You're so much faster. You're so much like faster thinkers than I ever was. And so I get a kick out of just like sitting and watching them
Very
talk with
witty.
each other. Yeah. But I think one of the other ways that I am restored in this work is I have I used to run a leadership development program for college age young Pacific Islanders. And I was in that organization where we started that program, and we ran 10 cohorts in a course of 4 years. And that was the last cohort that I was a part of was 2017. And so it's been a little while since. And I get so much joy out of watching the young leaders that came through that program, who are now in their late 20s, entering their
Mm-hmm.
30s, really choose their paths in life. Some of them are in nonprofit with me, some of them are my staff, and I continue to pour into them, because I always say that I am who I am today because so many other people poured into me. So it is my responsibility to pass that on. It's not for me to keep. So it brings me a lot of joy when, a lot of our young I'll sit with a lot of our young people, and they just ask me questions. Or just last week I spent 2 days at a program retreat with one of them, right? She actually went through our very first cohort, and she's my staff, and she's going to step into this role. And spending time with her and talking through developing it from her perspective as a young person, knowing what she learned from like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when she went through this program, it really fills me up in a way that I don't know anything else that does that for me. So even though like it's still part of my work, those kinds of relationships really
Yeah.
restore me.
I was just gonna say, and you answered the question because I was just gonna say, you could be working a corporate job, making so much more money than but you decided to stick to doing what you're doing now. And so, the question was, what keeps you staying where you are? But is that what you just answered? Is that what it is?
That is part of it. It's so funny because people always think that being a nonprofit is like, oh, you couldn't find any other job, so you decided to
Mm-hmm.
go and do that work,
Mm-hmm.
which is so far from the truth
Right.
for me. Um, I have chosen to stay here because, one, yes, I get to pour into our community. The other thing is there there's so much work to do here, and not enough of us in this space. And I don't blame people for not coming to nonprofit. It's unstable. It's funding dependent. It's a lot of work. Um, but it is really, I feel a calling to be in this sector.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I get to pour my talents and skills and knowledge into a space that where it's received. And so it just I think it's inherently Pacific Islander to be of service.
Yes.
And this being in this sector is a place for me to be of service. Um, and I always tell people in the work, nonprofits address the hardest issues because those are issues that government and corporate cannot address. So then it's just left. So nonprofits pick up the hardest to address issues for the most vulnerable of us. So that makes this work really hard, but it also means that there's not enough of us to be in that service. And no matter how many times I make my plan to like, oh, I'm gonna go into academia, I still remain here because I feel a calling to be here, and I hope that my life is useful spent
Mm-hmm.
here. So yeah, I love it. It's hard, but I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like what you mentioned, and it seems like a theme that we hear across different Pacific Islanders. Um, Sometimes our service here in the United States or anywhere off island is sort of devalued by those who are on island. And anytime we mention or try to resolve issues that are related to back home, we often are told, "You live in the states and you don't know what life is like. Here on the islands, you guys are so disconnected." But they also forget that there's a great number of us islanders that are living off island, and there's a lot of elders that are off island. So for us to neglect those who are here in the United States, New Zealand, Australia, wherever outside of the islands, it's a disservice for us to not tackle those issues. So we may not always be 100% connected back home, but we're also serving those who came before us, the generation that's behind us. We're still continuing those values, the culture to take care of those who came before us, that the families that decided to stay here in the states. Someone has to maintain that. So thank you for what you've done. Don't ever feel that your works aren't tied back home. So, and I know you do have a lot of work that's actually tied back home, because you do a lot of calls with the Tongan community. So also want to acknowledge that as well.
Thank you. I try to. I don't think it's my place to insert myself into things that are happening in Tonga, but I think it is my place as a Tongan to live into the responsibility of serving the Tongan population here
Mm.
in whatever ways that is connected back home. I think then it can be useful. But yeah, I try. I don't think I'm very good at, like, I do, like, also feel a huge responsibility. I always tell my parents that I'm eventually gonna move back to Tonga. And I don't know how successfully I will be able to transition into being useful there, because I know it won't look like what I do here. Um, but there's a strong desire for me to, like, go home and be useful to our motherland.
Mm.
I'm not sure if that will come to fruition for me, but I tell my parents that I'm only still here because they're here, and I also want to finish school so that I can be useful when I go home. I don't want to move back to Tonga and be useless. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Well, we have a couple more questions left, just a few, and I promise you they're going to be very easy because I know last night we spoke that you have guests coming over, and I want you to be able to spend all as much as time you can with your nieces, nephew, and your family.
it's
So,
fine. The kids spent the day at a Pacific Feet, which is like a big concert here
oh
in
yay!
Northern California that's put on by Samo and Leandra Leota, and
Oh,
our kids went and volunteered there. So I think they were just getting home. They probably just wanted to tell me about it. It's fine.
so I have to ask you, when you're in high school and now looking back, right? What would you tell yourself walking off of that stadium as you receive your diploma? What advice would you tell yourself?
Um, I think I would have told myself to prioritize what I like, my journey, um, rather than trying to make sure that everybody else is okay, because everybody will be okay. I think I was so worried, always trying to make sure that um, I didn't disrupt anybody else's life by the choices that I was making. That I ended up. It's the reason why I didn't go right into medical school after I got my master's, for example. I wanted to make sure that this person was in a good position, and then I kept putting it off. I took the MCAT. I was ready. I scored well. My everything was still fresh in my mind, and I, like, put it off. So I would have told myself to, like, live for me a little bit, and everything will be fine. but also be prepared for a bigger world that I did not know existed when I was crossing that stage, because so much more of my learning came after that.
And a 13-year-old girl that's coming from Tonga in a new world, what would you advise her, or any 13-year-old boy or girl coming from Tonga or any other islands to a new world? What would you advise them?
Oh man, I think probably the first thing that comes to mind is to hold on to your culture and your language as
Mhm.
much as possible, because it's so easy to lose it. Um, and it's so easy to forget what it's like. And I still, my parents speak Tongan, I speak fluently, and I know the culture fairly well. But I also am realizing as I'm getting older that I don't know the culture as well as I would have hoped. Because there were points in time where I was like, oh, I don't need to know that. That's not going to be useful to me anymore. And now I'm like, I should have learned that. And now I'm trying to learn it, but hold on to your culture.
Yeah.
It's such an essential part of who it's a most essential part of who we are that nobody can take away unless we give it away. And it's a part of who we are that we can tap into that doesn't exist for anybody else, right? It's like the resilience and the wisdom that comes from having grown up on island and knowing our culture and knowing our languages. We know what the practice of respect is. We know what the
Yeah.
practice of humility looks like. And if we let that go too early, then we lose the richness that comes from knowing that. And that those are some of the things that keep me strong in the work that I do, that gives me confidence in spaces and in instances where my my worthiness is questioned, or my
Mhm.
belongingness is questioned. My Tonganness is what keeps me grounded, and it's the strongest part of me. So
Mm.
yeah, my advice to any young person coming here is like, you can modernize without having to be westernized, right?
Mm.
Like, hold on to your culture as much as you can, because it is the biggest strength that you have that nobody, the world cannot give you here. Yeah, that's what
Thank
I
you.
would say.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. Now, one more thing I have to ask, because I love running, you love running. What's your go-to hyped up music that you listen to get you going?
Because I started training to run with oh my gosh, how did I what's it called? Team in Training.
Okay.
It's a running group that raised money for leukemia and lymphoma.
Ooh, yes.
And one of the lessons that they taught you in running was to not listen to anything, because then
Really?
it's not safe.
Mm.
So, or if you
Well,
do, you have to only put in one ear, right?
Mhm.
okay.
Because if you're running on the road, it's unsafe because you can't hear things around you. and
Okay.
and so I did not run with music. So I did not become accustomed to running with music. But I definitely get pumped up at the start line every race, right? Like, I it got to the point where I realized that if I get too hyped at the beginning, I end up having leg cramps towards the end. I don't know if my body reacts to adrenaline weirdly, but when I realized that, then I became like very meditative at the start line, even though there's like all this music that's like playing. Um, I would have to like calm down, don't like jump up and down and get all excited,
Yeah.
and then my leg cramps stopped. But
Oh.
I will tell you that like the music that when I'm feeling down, when I'm feeling depleted, I remember there was a period where I was going through that was like where I was really defeated. Um, and I listened to Islander music that is in our languages.
Oh.
I have a whole playlist on YouTube that's all Islander languages.
Mm.
And not just limited to Tongan, but like Solomon Island music, Marshallese. Like, I really wanted to
Wow.
tap into like our ancestral spirit through singing. and I just put this playlist of like and more the traditional rather than the contemporary music.
Mm.
For some reason, like just hearing the very simple ways that we sing, the singing in harmony in
Yes.
our language, it just heals me in a way that I don't know like any other medicine for. So that's I answered a different question.
No, that was beautiful. That ties into that. So no, and just adding to that, you're right because just the authenticity of how our culture, the music is sung, it just brings that different spirit.
Yeah.
And I love that. So thanks for sharing that.
I mean,
It
can I
reminds
ask
me
you
of
a question? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
no, I was gonna say you mentioned music, and I just so happened to watch Tina this weekend, and
Wait, how did you get
the
to watch
Samoan
Tana?
You
Where
song.
did?
I where'd you watch it at? What I haven't
That's
watched it yet.
secret information I can't reveal on here, but
Classified. It's classified.
Okay.
definitely must watch. But going back to the old songs that you mentioned, the songs that we sing, it automatically brings tears to your eyes, regardless. Just normally, when you listen to them, but hearing them in a movie, yeah, like you hear them sing one song and you're like, like you feel tears about to come down and you try to man up, like, oh, I'm tougher than that. And then the next one comes on and it's like, oh, really?
You're like, I
It's like
didn't
three or four
recover from
songs.
the
Yeah,
first one.
yeah. And my wife's like, looking over there and was like, no, good movie, good movie. Just
I can't wait to
it'll
watch it.
definitely touch your soul watching it.
Yeah, I cannot wait
Well,
to
we need
watch
to
it.
ask him after this.
To share his secret.
Yes.
Lea, so so I know you both run, right? What's been like your favorite like race or running experience?
So this last marathon I ran before my doctor said I can't do it anymore, but I've been still running. You know, I just feel like I know my body and my heart hasn't stopped, so I can still run. And I think I was 11th place for our age bracket,
What?
and only because it was about 50 degrees that morning, and I had a coat on, and I had my beanie hat, and I wasn't prepared in that sense. And that's one lesson I tell my kids is like, no matter what you do, where you go, you just got to be prepared for the unexpected. And I was such a bad example that day. I was hyped up the day before because Texas during the winter, it's so bipolar. One day it's like 70, 80 degrees. The next day it drops to 50 degrees. And so I came 11th place. I was upset, but I was actually proud of myself that I was able to run with a heavy jacket, a beanie hat, and my phone in one hand, and not even prepared to have that, where you have that strap on you.
Yeah.
But I made the mistake, and you just said, and I was laughing when you brought up the part about putting, don't have anything on while you're listening, because I had people behind me running and telling me on your left. But I was actually singing to Salt and Pepper song, what a man, because I love the songs back in the 90s. So I'm
Yes.
singing that song, and what a man the man ended up bumping into me, and with my small frame, I end up falling, and I'm like, what? And so people are telling me he was trying to tell you he's coming. He said, yeah. So yes, that is true. Do not walk or run with your headphones on or whatever. But I still do because I just have to listen to some kind of beat music just to get me
Yeah.
going. But truthfully, just to go back to what you mentioned about listening to ancestral music. My son served in a Marshallese island, and he was telling me, "Mom, you gotta listen to the Marshallese song. This one song, it's so beautiful," and it literally brought me like just in a different feeling. Like I'm not Marshallese,
Yeah.
but we are all
We feel
connected.
it.
Yes, and just to be able to feel it with a different language is just a whole new different
Yeah.
experience, and I enjoyed it and I love it. So I know what you mean.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do listen when I get to my moment. I have my me moment. And I know this is TMI, everybody, but my me moment is in the bathroom locked so my kids don't bother me. but but I do have time when even when I'm driving, I do listen to ancestral music, and the calmness, the peace. It's almost like they're talking to you and
Yeah.
reminding you of who you really are. And don't lose that to like what you just mentioned, to what don't be westernized and let your culture be lost in that. So
Yeah.
yeah, thanks
Yeah.
for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Tongan hymns also. That's
Yes.
that's the other.
Yeah, there's that one I always love watching. Is when
The one that they
the
sing all the
stadium.
time.
Well, it's like when the whole Tongan stadium, the stadium was all full, and then
Harmonizing.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
that's like one of the most powerful ones. I love watching that.
Yeah.
Just everyone
That's the
singing in one
second
heart. Yeah.
Yeah.
that's the Tongan national anthem.
Well,
Hmm.
let me add to this, right? Like, so I go to church with the Palangi people because again, there's no Samoans, no Polynesians. Growing up in a Samoan church, Samoan ward, you can never hear someone's Paulua like their off voice. You could never hear an off voice. You come to because everybody can sing, right? Even the babies can sing. I mean, even the 70, 80-year-old parent can sing. But then you come to another church that's different. It's
Yeah.
like you might as well just put some earplugs on because nobody is harmonizing the way that our Polynesian people can harmonize.
That's because
Sorry,
in the
Oh,
everybody.
island they actually sit with that long hibiscus branch, and if they hear you, they actually reach you from like 10 pews
Mhm.
back there, and they'll tell you, hey, you bring it down here. We don't want to hear you.
Oh,
get trained young.
Arlington, did you want me to put this up for you so you can read this
Yeah,
to
let's
her?
bring up some of the
Okay.
comments
Okay.
here. Okay, this is from Janet. I believe your life is very useful to the community and our people. You've contributed a lot by helping the Pacific Islanders' numbers be identified during the pandemic. That alone made a great difference.
Oh,
And she says, "Thank you for your service." Sorry, I didn't wait
Yeah,
to
thank
the
you
whole
for your
thing.
service.
And here's another one.
thank you.
And SSLT. So true. Hold on to your culture and customs. Tonga is unique among our Polynesian islands. If you look at the rest of Polynesia, Tonga is the only one that was not colonized by any other country.
It's
So,
true.
yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Well, Alisi, it was so fun to have you on our podcast. It's such a blessing. There's a reason for everything. And I'm so grateful for Moni for having you be able to talk to you to get you on our podcast because you're so busy and it's hard to, try to pull you out from your busy schedule. And so we really appreciate you being on our hot seat. Before we close, Arlington, before we turn the time to Lisi, is there anything you want to say?
Yeah, again, thank you for the time to share your story and share your challenges. And
Yeah.
sometimes we say, whether you let your guard down just so you can open up and let people understand your struggles. But you made a comment earlier, and I think it was more of a compliment when they refer you to as an elder. And I know in Samoa the term is laulusisina. So we talked about gray hair, and it's sort of an honor that they reference to you as one of their leaders or an expert in a certain particular area. So I think that was more of a compliment. Um, Also, you talked about connecting our outrigger. I love that proverb that you used because it has connected all of us. And the work that you do is just showing that you're not alone in this and don't stray too far. Whether you're Samoan, Micronesian, you know, or Polynesian or Melanesian, any of those Pacific Islanders, we ask you to not stray too far. The work that we do here does relate to you. It will impact you. So, you
Yeah.
know, whether we're paddling in the dark, we ask you to connect so that way we're united in whatever effort that we're pursuing. So I love that you mentioned that. Just want to do a quick shout out because you mentioned you acknowledge some of the young folks, and I also want to acknowledge some of the young folks. I do a lot of cultural things in the Samoa. There was a young gentleman who runs his own TikTok podcast, and he covers a lot of the cultural stuff. And sort of like what you mentioned, his name is Potua, and I enjoy his segment because he's a young guy. I think he's around 30, very knowledgeable in the culture, and just for him to share with different folks. He has a time, like we said, there's a time to laugh, and he has a segment for fun time, and then he has a segment for church time. Because right now I think it's Sunday at their time, but he also has a time for the culture. And if you arrive and you're joking because you think it's a joking time, he says, this is cultural time or this is church time. But I want to acknowledge, those young folks, because those are, those that are carrying the culture for the next generation. So um, those were the few things that, I wanted to mention. Um, yeah. Then altogether, just once again, thank you for everything that you do for our Polynesian folks, Pacific Islanders,
Yeah.
and also great thanks to you for accepting this invite. And thank you to Moni for connecting our outrigger tonight. So didn't want to forget about Moni as well.
Yes. Thank you so much. I mean, sorry, I don't want to interrupt your flow here, but I'm so humbled by the opportunity to share about my journey. I hope that it's useful.
Mhm.
And speaking of money, one of the he asked me to consider this opportunity right after a late night, according to California time. This is also late night for you both. Um, Teaching that we did with a couple of amazing people about the deep sea mining that is being considered
Mm,
offshore American Samoa, and and it's something that, even though that's impacting, that is like geographically is impacting the islands, and we're here in the
Yeah.
US, we still feel its impact and its potential threat to what it could do, both environmentally but also culturally, for not just American Samoa, but for the Pacific altogether. I know it's a conversation that's happening within the Tongan government
mm,
for
Mm.
seabed mining. I know that some of our Pacific islands have already accepted for that to happen. For example, one of the people that were in our teaching, she's Cook Islander, and Cook Islands is one of the countries that have accepted um, seabed mining. And so it was after that conversation that Moni asked me if I would consider being part of this opportunity and this conversation. And I just feel like it would be a failure for me to not mention that that's something that we're trying to get out there. Is the U.S. The federal government is taking public comment about the consideration for deep sea mining offshore American Samoa um, through the 16th of this month, so next week. And
Yeah.
so if there's an opportunity and if people feel strongly about contributing their public
Mhm.
comment to that process, you can find the information from Lengafa's
mm,
Instagram, or the video from that conversation is on SoCal PICRT's YouTube. If you want to watch that, and we have a toolkit available through our Instagram and our Facebook, if people want more information to make a decision on their own, or if you want a template for the public comment letter, we have one there.
Mhm.
But I'm just going to plug that. I was not planning on doing that, but speaking of money,
Yeah.
he moderated that conversation so beautifully, and I admire him for the way that he carries our culture and
right.
in language and in spirit, and it's just so profound and deep. And I'm grateful for this opportunity for connecting me to both of you. I hope that if someday I come across each of you in Texas or in Oklahoma or wherever in the world we might run into each other, I hope that we feel like we're familiar enough to
Yeah.
connect. And if there's any way that I can be of service, um, in the work that you both do, please feel free to let me know. And I may not have all the answers. I often don't have the answers, but I have people that I know, and networks and resources that I'm connected to that might be helpful in any way. And I appreciate the work you do here. And one of the things that I always say is we don't have ethnic media necessarily for our community, but we have individuals like both of you who are passionate about the voice and representation of our community and create these avenues for us to be visible. And so I thank you for this tremendous work that you do. You are carrying a part of our work that many of us don't have capacity to do. And so thank you for including me. I hope that I was able to offer something useful in this conversation. And I will always be in service for our community. So tap me when you need me to jump into the ring. And I'm there. And God bless you both. And thank you so much to everyone that has been here with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Malo opito.
Thank you. And to everyone out there in the audience, thanks for tuning in. And those who are about to watch for later on, you guys all have a blessed night. And to God be all the glory. Good night.